Tonight's story is about a woman who spent 7 months quietly running her boyfriend's entire life, and the one sentence that finally made her stop. This is Still Waters. Here's what she wrote. My boyfriend missed the biggest job interview of his year because he forgot about it. And when he called me sobbing afterward, the first thing he said was, "You knew about this. Why didn't you remind me?" I remember standing in my kitchen holding the phone, looking at the calendar on my own fridge where I'd written his interview in blue marker 3 weeks earlier, right next to my lesson plans, and understanding, all at once, exactly what I'd become to him. I'm Naomi. I'm 26. I teach second grade at a public elementary school outside Sacramento, which matters to this story more than you'd think, because I spend my working hours gently reminding 7-year-olds to zip their coats and turn in their homework. And I came to realize, slowly and then all at once, that I was doing the exact same job at home, unpaid, for a grown man. Cole and I had been together 7 months when the interview happened. We met through a mutual friend's barbecue, and for the first 6 weeks, he was, genuinely, the most attentive person I dated. He texted good morning every day, without fail. He remembered a stray comment I'd made about missing a certain candle scent, and showed up 2 days later with 3 of them. That part matters for everything that came after. So I'll say it plainly. It wasn't fake. He wasn't performing. He was just, I'd learn much later, extremely good at the opening act. Cole had been laid off from an IT support role about 2 years before we met and had been stringing together contract work since, waiting for something permanent. He talked about the layoff a lot in our first month, not in a self-pitying way, just enough that I understood it as a wound. And I wanted, the way you do early on, to be the person who helped him heal it. That's usually where these things start. Not with a request, with your own willingness. By month 2, I was the one who texted him the morning of every contract shift to make sure he was awake. By month 3, I'd added his dentist appointment to my own phone calendar because he'd missed one and been charged a $75 cancellation fee, and I decided, without either of us ever really discussing it, that this was now my job to prevent. By month 4, I was reminding him to renew his car registration, reminding him 2 days before his sister's birthday so he could order a card in time, reminding him the night before any interview to lay out his clothes, confirm the address, charge his phone. I did the math once, late at night, out of a kind of morbid curiosity. I was sending him an average of 9 reminder texts a week. 9. I'd never once counted anything like that in a relationship before, and the fact that I'd started counting should have told me something on its own. I want to walk you through one particular Wednesday from month 5, because the whole shape of it lives in that single day. 6:40 a.m., I texted him to confirm he'd set his alarm for a contract shift starting at 9. 7:15, I was already at school running my own morning duty, and he texted back a single thumbs up. 12:30. On my lunch break, I remembered his mother's birthday was in 4 days and texted him the reminder to order flowers because he'd forgotten his own mother's birthday the year before, and I didn't want to watch that unfold again. 3:45, driving home, I got a call from him asking if I could look up the confirmation number for a doctor's appointment he'd booked and then lost the email for, because his phone storage was full of photos he refused to delete. 8 o'clock that night, over dinner I'd cooked, he mentioned, almost as a compliment, that he didn't know what he'd do without me keeping track of everything. I remember smiling and saying something like, "That's what I'm here for," and only much later understanding how much I meant it as a joke and how literally he'd taken it. Here's the part I didn't understand yet, and it's the part I think matters most. when something went wrong despite my reminding, when he was late anyway, when he forgot anyway. It never landed as his mistake. It landed as mine. You said you'd tell me. I thought you were handling the confirmation email. Small sentences, easy to let slide individually. I let approximately 40 of them slide over those 7 months, is my rough estimate, and each one cost me a little more of the version of myself that used to trust her own memory of events. The interview was for a permanent systems administrator role at a logistics company in Elk Grove, 40 minutes from his apartment, paying $71,000 a year. The kind of job he'd been chasing for 2 years. The kind of job that would have actually changed something. I'd written it on my fridge calendar the day he told me about it, because by then, writing down Cole's important dates on my own calendar was just something I did, the way you'd note a school field trip. I did not text him a reminder that morning, and I need to be precise about why, because it matters. I woke up at 6:30 with a parent-teacher conference at 7:15 already sitting heavy in my chest, and somewhere in the rush of getting dressed, the thought crossed my mind. I should check that Cole's up. And right behind it, a second thought, clearer than the first. No. If this is really his interview, it has to survive one morning without me. I didn't decide that the way you decide something important. It was smaller than that, almost lazy, more relief than principle. But it was a choice. Calling it forgetting would let both of us off the hook too easily. He called me at 11:40, and I could hear before he said a word that something had collapsed. He'd woken up at 10:15. The interview had been at 9. He'd missed it entirely, and by the time he called the recruiter to apologize, the position had already moved to final interviews with 2 other candidates. He was crying, genuinely crying, and underneath the crying, almost immediately, was the sentence. You knew about this. Why didn't you remind me? I stood in my kitchen with the phone against my ear, looking at his own interview date in my own blue marker on my own calendar, and something in me went very quiet. Not angry yet, just quiet. The way a classroom goes quiet right before you realize a kid is about to cry. I'm not going to take responsibility for that, I said. I love you, but I'm your girlfriend. I'm not your mom. I can support you. I can't manage your whole life for you. I want you to understand that sentence was the gentlest version of the truth I could manage, and it detonated something in him I hadn't seen before. He told me I was selfish. He said I was making him feel like a burden, that he couldn't believe I'd throw his struggles back in his face the one time he needed me most. So the second I'm not perfect, he said, you decide I'm too much work. When I tried to explain that wasn't what I meant, he talked over me. I thought you were the one person who'd actually stand by me. Guess I misjudged you. Guess you're not as caring as I thought. That sentence, misjudged your character, not as caring as I thought, is the one I keep coming back to. Because I'd spent 7 months rearranging my own schedule, my own sleep, my own mental bandwidth around this man. And the single time I said one true sentence out loud, the caring I'd shown for 7 months apparently evaporated retroactively. I didn't break up with him that day because people expect a clean, immediate exit, and that's rarely how these things actually go. I sat with it for 4 days, genuinely unsure if I was the unreasonable one. Cole texted throughout those 4 days, not apologizing exactly, more auditing the relationship out loud. I've been thinking, and I really don't think what I said was that bad. I was just upset. And then, 2 hours later, are we okay? You're being really quiet. And I noticed, for maybe the first time, that even his attempts to check on me somehow required me to manage his anxiety about whether he'd get in trouble. I asked my roommate, Denise, who listened to the whole thing on our couch with a bowl of microwave popcorn going cold between us, and just said, quietly, "Naomi, when's the last time he remembered something for you?" I opened my mouth to answer, and then genuinely could not finish the sentence. I tried to think of a single instance. My birthday, a bad day at school, the week I had strep throat, and taught 3 days with a 101-degree fever because substitute coverage fell through, where Cole had been the one keeping track of me instead of the other way around. I could not produce one example. Denise didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. I sat with that silence longer than I've sat with almost anything. On the 5th day, I wrote the whole thing out, not to post anywhere, just to see it outside my own head, the way you'd write down a lesson plan to see if it actually made sense. And then, because I needed a second opinion from someone who wasn't already exhausted alongside me, I showed the written pages to my friend Ashley over coffee. Ashley read it twice, went quiet, and then told me something that rearranged the whole picture. "This is going to sound insane," she said, "but my cousin dated Cole for 8 months 2 years ago. Before you." She told almost this exact story at Thanksgiving once. The reminders, the missed things turning into her fault, the blow-up when she finally said something. I thought she was exaggerating at the time. That detail changed the entire shape of what I thought I was dealing with. A pattern that had existed before me, with someone else, doing exactly what I'd been doing, absorbing exactly what I'd absorbed. I called Cole's sister, Marisol, who I'd gotten close to over those 7 months, and asked her, carefully, whether their mother had managed a lot of Cole's life growing up. Marisol went quiet in a way that told me everything before she said a word. "Mom still calls him every morning to make sure he's up," she said. "She's done that since high school. She used to call his college roommate to check if Cole had gone to class. I always figured whoever he dated would just end up doing that too, eventually. I didn't think it was my place to warn anyone." I sat with that for a long time after we hung up. Cole wasn't malicious, and it would almost be easier if he were. He was 28 years old and had never once, in his entire life, been allowed to find out what happens when nobody catches him. Every single time he'd started to fall, someone, his mother, his college roommate by proxy, his ex, now me, had been standing underneath with a net. I wasn't dating a bad man. I was the 4th net. Before that Tuesday came, there was one more conversation I have to tell you about, because it's the one that made the decision easy instead of agonizing. 6 days after the interview, I finally showed Cole the pages I'd written. Not to humiliate him, not to build a case, just because I needed him to see the shape of it laid out plainly instead of scattered across 7 months of individual Tuesdays. I sat next to him on his couch and watched him read it, his jaw getting tighter with every paragraph. When he finished, his first question was, "So this is what you actually think of me?" To be fair to him, I don't think that question was fake. It genuinely hurt him to see it written down, the way it would hurt anyone. That part was real, but real hurt and a real bid for control aren't opposites, and both were sitting in that room at the same time. Because his very next sentence, before I could even answer the first one, was, "You've just been quietly resenting me this whole time, and you never said anything?" Which wasn't a question about his own behavior anymore. It was a question about mine. He'd taken 4 sentences to travel from "I'm hurt" to "you did something wrong to me," and I don't think he even noticed the trip. I told him that wasn't it at all, that I loved him, that I'd been too scared to say it out loud because I knew exactly how he'd react, and watching him react proved I'd been right to be scared. He spent the next 40 minutes explaining how betrayed he felt, that I'd written it down at all, and somewhere in there, without either of us quite noticing the handoff, I ended up the one comforting him, again, about a conversation where I was supposed to be the one who needed comforting. I drove home that night and sat in my car in the driveway for a long time before I could make myself go inside, because I finally understood that even in the one conversation where I was allowed to be hurting, I was still expected to manage his feelings about it. I broke up with him 9 days after the interview, on a Tuesday evening, sitting across from him at the small kitchen table in his apartment. I told him I loved him, which was true, and that I couldn't keep being the person responsible for whether his life held together, which was also true, and that both of those things could exist in the same sentence. He didn't yell this time. That almost made it harder. He went very still, and then very small, and asked if there was anything he could do right now, tonight, to fix it. When I said no, the questions changed shape. Who's going to help me with the Henley account renewal on Friday then? A work deadline. Not us. The first thing he reached for. Then, can you at least still remind me about my mom's birthday next month, since you already know the date? I sat there for a second, genuinely stunned that he was asking me to keep doing the job 3 minutes into being broken up with, and I told him, as gently as I could, that Marisol could help him with that one now. He looked at me like I'd changed the terms of something without warning him. Only then did he cry, and I believe the crying was real, the same way the hurt over the pages had been real. He said he could change, that he just needed time, and I told him I believed he probably could, someday, for the right reasons, but that I couldn't be the reason. Because being someone's reason to change is its own kind of full-time job, and I'd already been working 2 of those for 7 months. He asked, right before I stood up to leave, whether I'd ever really loved him, or just the version of him from those first 6 weeks. I told him the truth. I loved both versions. That was exactly the problem. Loving someone was never actually the question. The question was whether love, on its own, was supposed to be enough to run someone else's whole life. And I finally knew the answer was no. The weeks after were harder than I expected and easier than I feared, both at once. I kept almost texting him reminders out of pure 7-month habit. His dentist appointment came and went on my calendar, and I had to consciously make myself not mention it, the way you have to consciously stop reaching for a phantom limb. 3 weeks after the breakup, I deleted the recurring reminders I'd set for his registration renewal and his sister's birthday, and felt something between grief and relief that I still don't have a clean word for. Marisol texted me once, about a month later, to say Cole had started seeing someone new, and that she'd already noticed him asking her, over group chat, to remind him about a work thing. I didn't respond to that message for 2 days. When I finally did, I just wrote, "I hope she reads the room faster than I did." Marisol sent back a single word. Same. My mother, when I finally told her the whole story over the phone, asked me gently why it took a missed job interview to see something that had apparently been building for months. I told her the truth, which is that every single individual reminder felt too small to be the hill you'd end a relationship on. 9 texts a week doesn't sound like a crisis. It just sounds like Tuesday. It's only when you add up 250 of them that you understand you've been quietly filling in for a mother who never stopped showing up, in a role nobody ever actually offered you the choice to take. I still teach second grade. I still spend my days reminding small children to zip their coats. And I still don't mind that part of my job because 7-year-olds are supposed to need reminding. That's what makes them 7. What I finally understood, standing in my kitchen with a phone against my ear and a date in blue marker on my own fridge, is that 28 isn't 7. And love was never supposed to mean volunteering to stay the only adult in the room. So here's what I keep wondering. How do you tell the difference between supporting someone and quietly becoming responsible for them before you're 250 reminders deep? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone. That's the whole story. If this one stayed with you, subscribe to Still Waters. Thanks for listening.